probably something a little twisted about the fact that millions of people around the world genuinely enjoy watching horror movies, which mostly consist of humans dying in painful, grisly ways. Yet still we watch, and still we enjoy. Maybe it's in knowing that these horrifying on-screen events are fictional that helps keep the bloodshed light and breezy, but that doesn't help when it comes to the movies getting their rotten roots into actual events, places, and people. Then it is quite literally too real, and the scares are a lot closer to home than is comfortable. There are some well-known examples of this, like the Amityville Horror, The Conjuring, and The Exorcist, but there are a whole bunch more with dark, real-world ties lurking under the surface that you might not know about. Whilst many horror movies wear their true story terrors as a badge of honour, there are plenty more that secretly take their inspiration and carefully hide their tracks. But a little digging reveals all. Prepare for your scares to be anything but fictional. I am the lie detector, Ash from What Culture Horror, and these are 10 horror movies you didn't know were based on true stories. 10. Child's Play. The whole doll comes to life and kills people concept of the Child's Play series is obviously not based on fact. Or at least, I hope so, anyway. But the general idea of the creepy doll is. The famous Chucky doll from Child's Play was inspired by Robert the Haunted Doll, an odd-looking creation with a sinister blank stare and a white sailor outfit. Robert, who's now on public display in a Florida museum, used to be owned by a painter named Robert Eugene Otto, and this is where the doll got its name. The story goes that Otto was given the doll by a servant who worked for his parents. She felt unfairly treated, so cursed the doll as a way to punish the Otto family, who then was said to be caught blinking, talking, and even moving. When he was locked in the attic, laughter and footsteps could be heard. For some reason, Otto kept the doll until his death in 1974, at which point it passed to another family, and the terror continued. Of course, the supernatural parts of this story are probably not true, but the basic idea of a creepy doll who can talk and move, and of course some supernatural intervention to make it happen, is something that Child's Play takes its cues from. 9. Borderland. 2007's Borderland follows 3 recent Texas college graduates who decide to head down to Mexico to check out some strip clubs and have a good time. While there, they take some mushrooms, drink, get into fights, and soon encounter a bloodthirsty cult that is determined to sacrifice a human which they believe will help them with their drug smuggling exploits. You know, just guy things. This story is based on the life of serial killer Adolfo Constanzo, who led a cult that was responsible for countless ritualistic killings, and the death of Mark Kilroy, a student at the University of Texas. Kilroy was tortured and murdered in a ritual by Constanzo's cult, with the leader telling his followers that Kilroy's sacrifice would make them immune to law enforcement, so they could smuggle drugs more easily. In the film, Sean Astin plays an American character called Randall, a serial killer who is in cohorts with the cult. This character seems to be based on Constanzo, since the two even look and dress similarly. As for Kilroy, one of the college graduates is tortured and killed in a ritual, which seems to be a representation of Kilroy's brutal real-life murder. 8. The Strangers. The Strangers, about a couple who are terrorized at a vacation home by a trio of mass killers, is one of the most effective home invasion thrillers in recent memory, and it becomes even scarier when you learn that it was based on real-life events. One inspiration came from an encounter that writer-director Brian Bettino had when he was a child. He once heard a knock at the door while his parents were away, and upon answering it, he was greeted by some strangers who asked for someone that didn't live there. Later, Bettino found out that these people were responsible for a series of robberies, and were knocking on people's doors to check if anybody was home. The Manson family murders also provided some inspiration for the film, alongside a little-known case called the Keddy Cabin Murders, which was the quadruple homicide of Susan Sharp and 3 teenagers who were staying at the Keddy resort with her. To this day, the case remains unsolved, which is possibly where Bettino got the idea to use a gang of faceless, nameless killers from. In any case, the lack of motivation and mystery killing in the movie is eerily close to home. 7. Ravenous. Ravenous is a cannibal movie starring Robert Carlyle as Cahoon, a man addicted to good old human meat, and Guy Pearce as Boyd, a US Army lieutenant out to stop him. The film is set in the snowy Sierra Nevada mountain range, with Cahoon luring a group of soldiers to a cave so he can consume their flesh. Tasty. The 2 main inspirations behind the film are the Donner Party and the story of Alfred Packer. The Donner Party was a group of pioneers who became stranded in the same mountain range depicted in the film, with some of the pioneers turning to cannibalism in order to survive, eating those who died from starvation or the cold. Packer, also known as the Colorado Cannibal, also ate human flesh, munching down on his companions when the expedition he was a part of became lost in the mountains in 1847. In the film, in order to lure the soldiers to the cave, Cahoon tells the group that his wagon train became lost in the mountains, forcing him into cannibalism. This is similar to how Packer himself became lost in the mountains, with both men performing an unspeakable deed to stave off hunger and keep their lives. 6. Silent House. Silent House follows Elizabeth Olsen as Sarah, a young woman helping her uncle and father clean up their family's run-down Victorian country house. The three soon come under attack by a group of mystery assailants, forcing Sarah to fight back. This version of the film is based on the original Uruguayan version directed by Gustavo Hernandez. Hernandez was inspired by a real-life story that took place in the 1940s, where 2 mutilated bodies and several disturbing photographs were found inside a country home. In an unusual move, he intended his film to act as the last 80 minutes before that double murder took place. So, Silent House isn't based on something that actually happened. Rather, it's based on what Hernandez imagined had happened, with the director essentially creating the events that led to 2 bloody corpses and a bunch of grim photos. The scary part is that the outcome to both the movie and real life remain the same. 5. The Entity. Based on the 1978 novel of the same name, The Entity stars Barbara Hershey as a woman who is sexually tormented by an invisible force. Both the film and the novel drew inspiration from the Doris Bither case, with Bither claiming she was frequently attacked and raped by some sort of unseen entity. Bither's claims came to light when she met Kerry Gaynor and Barry Taff, parapsychologists who investigated her story. Taff and Gaynor eventually discovered that Bither had a damaged past, with a long history of physical and substance abuse that would go some way towards explaining her wild claims about supernatural forces. Of course, the film concludes by revealing that the entity was real all along. However, despite Taff claiming that she had snapped pictures of such an entity in real life, the actual case remains ambiguous in the wake of Bither's death in 1995. 4. A Nightmare on Elm Street. Freddy Krueger's whole shtick is that he invades the dreams of his victims, chases them down, and kills them, murdering them whilst they sleep. As outlandish as the concept is, it actually has roots in a real-life phenomenon called sudden arrhythmic death syndrome, which involves people dying unexpectedly in their sleep. Director Wes Craven was inspired by one particular case involving this syndrome, which he read in an LA Times article. The article spoke about a family that managed to survive the Cambodian killing fields in the 1970s and made their way to the United States. Thinking they were safe and well, tragedy soon struck the family when the youngest boy died in the middle of the night, screaming. In 2014, Craven went into further detail about the boy's story in an interview with Vulture. He told his parents he was afraid that if he slept, the thing chasing him would get him, so he tried to stay awake for days at a time. When he finally fell asleep, his parents thought his crisis was over. Then they heard the screams in the middle of the night. By the time they got to him, he was dead. He died in the middle of a nightmare. Here was a youngster having a vision of a horror that everyone older was denying. That became the central line of A Nightmare on Elm Street. 3. The Sacrament. The poster for 2013's The Sacrament promises to show us the untold story of the tragedy at Eden Parish, a fictional settlement within the film that is inhabited by a seemingly peaceful community of people. As it turns out though, this commune has a dark underbelly involving suicide and abuse, with the film culminating in dozens of people consuming cyanide-laced drinks. This plot is based on the real-life Jonestown massacre of 1978, in which 918 people, members of an American cult led by Reverend Jim Jones, were ordered to commit mass suicide by drinking fruit punch laced with cyanide. The film is presented in the found footage format, with a group of journalists visiting the remote Eden Parish to make a documentary. By the end, one of these journalists is dead, which mirrors the Jonestown massacre, where several journalists were also killed whilst on a mission to learn more about the cult. Creepy. 2. Dead Ringers. David Cronenberg's 1988 psychological horror flick stars Jeremy Irons as identical twins Beverly Mantle and Elliot Mantle, both successful gynecologists who specialise in the treatment of female fertility issues. The story is loosely based on the lives of Stuart and Cyril Marcus, real-life twin gynecologists who both died together in July 1975. For many months before their deaths, the behaviour of the Marcus twins became increasingly erratic and strange. They would skip shifts at the hospital where they worked and even cancel appointments at their private practice. And eventually, they were let go by the hospital because they could no longer be trusted. Weeks later, they were dead, and it's assumed that depression played a part in their downfall. This is the part of the twins' lives that Dead Ringers draws from, their decline and eventual death. In the film, the Mantle twins are suspended from their practice on account of their unpredictable behaviour, similarly to how the Marcus twins were let go in real life. 1. The Blob. As ludicrous as it sounds, The Blob, both the 1958 and 1988 versions, are based on a real-life incident. Yes, that film about a giant squirt of alien jelly eating its way around a small American town was inspired by an odd occurrence that took place in Philadelphia in 1950. On September 26 of that year, 2 police officers reportedly saw a shape that resembled a parachute falling from the sky. Upon investigating the object, they found something really strange, something that seemed alien. Roughly 6 feet in diameter and giving off a strange mist, this purple thing was touched by one of the officers, leaving an odourless, sticky residue on his hand. Oi oi. And that was pretty much the end of it. Whatever this thing was, nobody was able to determine, and it dissolved into nothingness shortly after. The filmmakers behind the Blob then used the basic idea of a sticky extraterrestrial mass and turned it up to 11, resulting in the 2 Blob films we have today. You're welcome, I guess. And that's our list. Which of these true stories are the most terrifying? Share your thoughts in the comments section below. I've been Ash over on social media at Ash Millman, and this has been What Culture. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and come back again soon for some more spine-tingling horror content. Thanks for watching.